Hello there, I'm Isabelle and this is my drafting table, where today I'll be making a robot from Castle in the Sky. I did very little planning for this project and mostly winged it, but I did do a quick sketch before starting. I mean, a plan is still a plan, even if said plan is to make things up as you go. The inspiration for this build is the scene in the movie when Pazu and Cheetah find the tombstone in the garden, and it shows all the broken robots that are covered in moss and overgrown roots. So with a wonky sketch, a reference image, and an unplanned plan, let's get started. I had this piece of foam cardboard laying around and I'm gonna trim that into a square and trim it again to make the edges uneven. Then I'm gonna hot glue random chunks of pink XPS foam that I had left over from another project. I didn't put much thought behind the placement of the pieces, I just glued the chunks wherever my heart desired. Let's finish gluing the foam real quick. Next, I'll cover the base in air-dry clay. Unfortunately, I didn't seal the bag properly the last time I used it, and the clay is half dried and kinda crumbly, but it actually worked out perfectly because the half-dried texture was exactly what I was going for. So that was a happy little accident. With the bits of clay that were still malleable, I made wormy dealies that will serve as the tree roots surrounding the robot. Safety tip: do not put your fingers where you just applied a coat of glue, because hot glue is, well, hot. I'll also add rough lines with a silicone tool to create a bark texture. I'll finish covering everything in clay. And I'll use the glue gun to add smaller roots and to add more dimension to the big ones. I'll set the base aside for the clay to dry completely and I'll start working on the robot. As usual, I'll take a sheet of aluminum foil and smush it into a sort of funnel shape, and then I'll cover it in clay. Next, I'll carve a line all around the torso using an X-Acto knife. Then I'll add two smaller half ovals on the torso. I'll poke a hole with a ball tool, and I'll insert a piece of wire to support the neck and the head. I'll start working on the head, and we'll let you enjoy this video montage. The robot is starting to take shape. You know what? Let's give this robot a name. I'll call it Robert. Let's not forget the crest of the royal family on Robert's chest, and I'll get started on making the wings. I roll a thin piece of clay and I'll trim the clay around a paper template that I made off camera. That makes two legs. Let's make the arms in the exact same way but with a longer template. Using a silicone tool, I'll carve little lines to create multiple segments in the leg. I wasn't too worried about symmetry or making the details perfect because I'm gonna destroy half of it in a moment. But before that, I wanted to show you this little feat I made. Okay, that's all. Now, let's do some destroying. Using tweezers, I'll rip off a few chunks of clay here and there. Sorry, Robert. I'll also use a small ball tool to add texture and dents. And I'll repeat the process on all the pieces. I added a wire in both arms so I can attach them to the shoulder joints. I test fitted the longer arm, but I'll remove it before baking. It will be easier to paint as a separate piece and I'll just glue it on later. Oh, I almost forgot to make little hands. I didn't put much effort in these. I plan to cover them in moss anyway, so as long as it sorta resembles a hand, I'm happy with that. Let's put all of Robert's bit in the oven, and while that is baking, let's finish the base. I'll use pliers to remove some of the clay and foam to make space where the robot will sit. Then I'll prime everything with a mixture of black paint and Mod Podge. Once that was dried, I dried brushed some brown on the roots. I started with darker shades of brown and will gradually make my way up to lighter colors. I'll also add some green. I made sure not to add too much paint so some of the black would still show through. It creates a very nice shadow and I'll just need to dry brush the highlights. Robert will get a few coats of brown. And the crest gets painted in red. I'll paint the eyepiece in multiple coats of metallic paint. All the limbs will receive a few coats of brown and everything will be soaked in a dark wash. I'll use a paper towel to dab the excess off. Once that was dried, I assembled the robot onto the base. And while I do that, maybe now would be a good time to give this video a like, or maybe even consider subscribing. Now it's time for my favorite part, adding moss. I'll mix modeling paste with a chunk of moss that I trim into tiny pieces. And I'll apply the moss paste onto the base. I tried my best not to overdo it because I really like how the roots are looking and still want them to show at least a little bit. And I know it looks really bad right now, but don't worry, once it's dried, the modeling paste will be transparent and it won't look like coleslaw. See, that doesn't look so bad. I'll dry brush a few spots in beige to make highlights on Robert. I'll also go over a few spots in green to tie everything together. And that's it. Let's move on to the glamour shots. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.